Yep. Hello, everyone. Wait for the last ones to get their seats. So today I wanted to talk about the importance of building your APIs the right way. We learned the hard way how not to do it, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our experience at Eventbrite, how we went from a very monolithic source code for the APIs that we were not using ourselves to a bunch of services that power the current API that we have. Do you have oh no, you're doing it? All right. It's a bit small. So what is Eventbrite? We're the leading global ticketing and event technology platform today. We started in Silicon Valley in 2006. It was me and my two co-founders. I was the tech founder and responsible for a lot of the decisions we had to make over the years as to what we built and how we built it. So we started with small events like a yoga class, small, medium size. That's the first solution we launched was a very simple product that connected you and your PayPal account to a platform that allowed you to create tickets very easily. In a few minutes, you could have an event website with tickets to be sold. Not only that, but you were collecting the money directly into your PayPal account, which appealed to a lot of organizers out there who need the money to actually pay their providers before the event. All the other solutions that existed were for much larger events. They cost a lot of money. They were very heavy to use. And they didn't give you the money until after the event, sometimes a month after the event. So we had a very different value proposition. We probably were the first company to really focus on that segment, what we call the long tail of events. We thought it was a big business. We didn't really know. We still don't know. It's growing every year. There's a lot more of these type of events, for example, in tech. And we've benefited greatly from that. Now we organize big food and wine festivals, races in the mud. That's probably our biggest client. It's called Tough Mudder. They sell, I think there was an article today, they've sold 2.5 million tickets in the last 3 years. And we power all their events globally. Big music festivals. So we started the business really thinking about small, medium-sized events. And as we became successful, we started creating more and more complex features and attracted a lot of the big events who came to us because they were unhappy with their provider. The fees were too high. The service wasn't self-service. They had to call their account manager to do everything. We provided a very open self-service platform, and that resonated with a lot of customers. And slowly but surely, we launched an API in 2008. We became the center, the nervous system of the organizer. Through this API, we were able to convince a lot of partners to join us, to integrate with our API, to create an ecosystem that answers the needs of pretty much any kind of organizers. So think about Salesforce, MailChimp, SurveyMonkey, all these great companies that have very specific tools that are very useful to organizers that we were able to integrate into our platform through this API. So the importance of the API decision for us to launch the API, I think has been incredible in terms of positioning us slightly differently from all the incumbents. Most of the incumbents were not technology companies, they were ticketing companies, and that's a very different mindset. We knew that to become a platform, we had to have an API, an open API that anyone can use for free. That's still the case today. We make deals with certain partners, but anyone can start developing on our platform today. And we also have on-platform experience through our extensions. So if you're part of the organizer life cycle, you can, with a little development time, you can be on our platform and have access to wide hundreds of thousands of organizers. That's very powerful when you are talking with potential partners. So, as I said, we launched our API in 2008. It answered a very simple need. We had partners who wanted to list our events. So we created an event search API. It was one call. That a few event discovery platforms integrated, newspapers integrated them. There were a whole bunch of people who were involved in helping you find the best event to attend. that used our data. And slowly we started building on it. We built event creation, creating users, creating tickets, getting your attendee details so that you could connect them with your CRM or your mailing system. All the things that we were asked to do by our organizers. They had these different tools out there and they needed someone who could organize the data and inject it in the right place at the right time. And that's why we built this API in the first place. We build it very monolithically. That's a monolith, that's one big piece. And actually our API was self-contained in one file. It was called apipages.py. It had everything that the API was doing: authentication, returning data, transforming data. And the main problem with it that it took off really well. Like, we currently have more than 10,000 people who have applied for an API key that have developed or played with the API. About 15% of our gross ticket sales come from people who are using the API in one way or another. And as the year went by, we forgot one very important thing, is that you have to eat your own dog food. This is dog food if you don't can see it. We let the API evolve in a very separate path from our main product. And what happened is what is on the next slide. We built a lot of stuff for the platform, all kinds of functionality that our organizers wanted, but we never put them into the API because it was a totally separate code base. We didn't have time to do both. We didn't have enough engineers. We didn't want to invest in that space for a reason or another. So about 2011, that's the state we were in. We had this API that was still in one file, the platform that had evolved, we had mobile apps, we had a lot of needs for all the functionality that was in the platform itself that we had to port over to the API. So we made a pretty drastic decision to go from one monolith to multiple services. And it's not an easy decision, it's a lot of work. We started the process in 2012, we're still going through it. We still have a lot of code that needs to be serviced. But it's definitely the right approach when you're building APIs. So what is a service? It's a discrete and separate units that each concern themselves with the concepts, data, and actions of a specific and narrowly defined area. So think about creating almost a separate product, and our first one was our payment service. The payment service only cares about moving money from point A to point B. It doesn't know anything about events, it doesn't know anything about tickets. It could be applied to any type of businesses. But it's self-contained, it has its own database, its own language. It could be programmed in any language. We decided to use Python, but because we were familiar with it, but it's totally self-contained. And I think when you design APIs, that's one thing that you really need to think through before you jump in. One big thing we invested in was, so that's what it kind of looks like. It's a couple years old already, this graph. But basically, you have all your clients at the top, web admin tool, mobile apps, third-party APIs, scripts, and then we created buckets of areas of concern that we wanted to address. So we have payments, we have inventory, users, events, all these things that are self-contained services. And they're exposed, not quite, they're exposed through a very thin layer at the top, the communications layer. That's a common interface across all the different clients that allows us to quickly transform the services into APIs. So that's something we developed ourselves. I'll talk a bit more in details after that. And then we have the technical services. So yes, you can build services totally different from each other, but you can benefit a lot from having common layers or common practices across the different things that these APIs will need to do. So caching, queuing, tasking, emails, notifications, databases also. We constrain ourselves to a set of databases that we think are relevant, that we can manage, that we have expertise in. Next. So basically services provide a lot of reusability. Actually, this is the description for the service layer we created. So we have the code for the service, and then on top we have what we call our SOAR library, service-oriented architecture library. And this library takes care of a lot of the details for communication across between the client and the service. Takes care of operational scale. It's much easier to test because all services use the same infrastructure to be tested. It's stateful if you need it, and it has autonomy and can be reused everywhere, which made our life much easier. That's something that was critical, I think, in the success of this task, to define that common layer across all the services that we can call through a third-party client can use it through the API, but we also can call it direct. We can call the service directly inside Python, almost like a library, which makes it a lot more flexible for us to use day in, day out. All right, next. So it takes care of a lot of things for us as well. Versioning, error handling, governance, security, all the things that you need to take into account when you are exposing a service both internally to our mobile apps, for example, they all use the API, or to external clients. So how do you release different versions of the API without too much work on the service side? How do you keep your services calling each other, calling the right version? All these are problems you're going to have to face when your services are evolving in a different direction and potentially different speed than the other services. While they are separate and independent, they need to call each other to get the right data to do the right actions. For example, the payment service needs to call the event service to get the tax rate, for example, or something like that. So these are constraints that having that common service layer helps facilitate a lot. We had the first version of the API, which was the one file I described, and we launched our V3. We had a V2 that was kind of started but never finished, and the V3 is the one we currently use. It was launched in January 2014. And it was a completely new code base, so it's separate from anything that we had written before. It uses Django's RESTful framework. It's backwards compatible, not quite. Backwards compatible with the V1, so we were able to use a lot of the existing code when we launched it, and then we rewrote all the code that was in the first file. That made the transition a lot faster than if we had to rewrite all the services on day one. We still have V1 clients. We still haven't fully retired it. I think that's something also that you need to think about. Your users will develop with the API that's set at a moment in time. How do you make them evolve with you? How do you make them update the version or the calls that they're making? That's definitely a challenge over time. So establish good communications with your developers. Make sure you have a way to reach them. Make sure you have a way to target them if they're using specific API calls that will change or won't be backwards compatible anymore. That's a lot of the administrative role in the API management is, I think, understated by a lot of companies. They don't really understand that it's actually going to require someone to dedicate time to deal with developers in general. It's not just evangelization, it's also maintenance over time. And recently we added support for webhooks. So that solved the big pain point of having API clients calling us repeatedly to get the same information. So now they had a different way. They could just register a webhook. Every time there's a new ticket sale, we call their endpoint, and something happens on their side. They didn't need to query us 20 times a minute anymore to do the same thing. Today we handle about 500 million API calls a month. That's a lot of data, that's a lot of servers, so think about that when you build. You don't know how big it's going to be. You can't prevent people from coding badly and putting API calls into loops that never end. It's happened many times before, so make sure you have processes in place to block access, to find the IPs that are responsible, to talk to developers who are abusing the system. It's a lot of infrastructure that's fully dedicated to our APIs. And as I said before, it enabled us to have 140 quality partners today on the platform. So if you go to eventbrite.com/spectrum, you'll see this list. It's a subset of all the people who have integrated with Eventbrite. It's the one we have contacts with that have given us more information that we might have biz dev deals with that we think are so valuable for the organizers that we want to promote them. So if you are thinking about creating an ecosystem, I think that's a great way to get them visible on your platform, get them engaged. And today we also have on-platform extensions, which are a way for the partner to be fully integrated into Eventbrite. If you create an account and create an event today, you'll see in the left navigation bar at the bottom, there's a set of extensions. So these are companies that have developed front-end experiences based on our APIs that are accessible from within Eventbrite itself. That, I think, takes the partnership to a next level when they're almost fully integrated as part of our product, which is very valuable, especially for small companies. We've had many partners that started just because they had access to the API and access to these extensions, and today most of their revenue comes from that. So thank you. I wanted to have enough time for questions, because I don't know how many of you are developers, by the way. Quite a few, okay. So do you guys have any question about our strategy and what it took, or?
So if we start today integrating our platform with Eventbrite's API for event management, what is the profit that we will earn from this? Is it like transaction based, or is it like how we will earn money as platform developers?
Well, you can be a SaaS platform that offers a certain service, then you get the client directly and you deal with the client. If you're on the extensions framework, you control the experience. We provide you with this, like a style sheet that you can use to make it look like our site, but the end-to-end experience is yours to take. If you want to charge them along the way, you can. For event discovery, we have some deals with specific partners where sometimes we share a part of our fees, but hasn't been a great business model for anyone so far. Our fees are quite low already, so you're getting 5 or 10% of that, which makes it quite hard to actually build a real business from that. I think the ones that have been most successful are the ones that are either subscription-based or one-off fees for a specific service for an event. Those are able to get a lot of traction quickly through that.
How do you ensure fair usage of a web API? Do you do any throttling, or you block, or?
Yeah, we block a lot. We have limits that we can adjust based on the API key. There's a lot of controls in place on the operation side to detect users that are abusing the system. So that's a lot of infrastructure you need to put in place to be able to do that. And communication as well, to tell them, yeah, we blocked you, you are using it too much or the wrong way.
Okay, because from what I remember, if you are, let's say, developing a web application, you can block different retries by using a CAPTCHA and so on. But in a web API, it's a free for grabs calls. So on the cloud level, on the network level, is there anything in place to also mitigate this risk, or it's all on the developer side?
On our side of the infrastructure?
Yes, it's on the developer side, or does the, let's say, Windows, Azure, or any cloud-based environment does anything to protect that as well?
No, it's all on us to do it. We had to build the rules. It's highly dependent on your application. So you might have real-time Twitter feed that has very different constraints from searching for events, for example. So it's really, I don't think it's the cloud provider's role to provide this infrastructure. Having said that, there's API clouds that are providing all these services, and that might be a better option for a new company starting today than building it yourself. I think it's quite expensive from what I hear. We decided to build it ourselves, but there are quite a few providers now that are providing you all the infrastructure for your APIs.
Another question for the API for the developers: is it possible to white label the solution, or will it be still like emails going from Eventbrite?
Well, it's not white label because we don't. We have an order. We have an order API that we've shared with a few partners, but it's not public. So there's no way for you to complete the transaction.
Okay.
We did it for our Facebook integration. You can now buy tickets directly on Facebook with the Facebook events you created through our platform. But
At least put our name also on the ticket that users buy, that they know that they bought on our platform or something like that?
not currently, not that part.
Okay.
And you can create your own product that has event listings, for example. That's your own brand. But eventually the purchase goes through us still, except for, as I said, Facebook is one of their first partners, and we're potentially opening up to others.
Okay.
But our name is always there because people need to know who to talk to, and there's a lot of after customer service that needs to happen. And Facebook, for example, didn't want to do that. We know that we have the relationship with the organizer, so it's our role to be that contact.
Another important topic is the authentication. When we send to users to your services, do we know that when they buy ticket through webhooks that they have been authenticated, and so that we can match back? And
Yeah, that's a big pain point for sure. You need to build it the right way, otherwise you can get into trouble. Or give access to, like we have sub-user controls, for example. You can delegate some permissions to some other user. So we had to build a lot of this logic to check that they have the right credentials on the right events for the right action. That's pretty important to build right also.
What kind of communication protocols do you use for the communication between the different microservices that you have?
I think we have 4 different protocols, and HTTP is one, I think RPC, and I can't remember what the other 2 are.
Over sockets or something?
Yeah, I think sockets is another one. We mostly use HTTP ourselves, except when it's inside Python. Yeah. We'll get it out.
Hey, where do you see Eventbrite between other event platforms programmatically or in the development field?
How do I see it?
Yeah.
As the best, or?
Yeah, something
Yeah,
like
of
that.
course.
The best?
And we're the most technologically advanced company in the space because we're a technology company, we're not a ticketing company. Ticketing is the thing we started with, but today we want to bring other types of technologies to the event space. Like RFID bracelet is our next real big push. We started last year, we acquired a company that does that. Now it's being deployed in plenty of different music festivals. We're adding cashless payments on top, so we really focused about finding better ways to do things. Ticketing was broken, so we addressed that first by being the best platform to do that. But there's many other things that are broken in the industry, and we hope now we have much more financial power to investigate all the other areas we want to be in. The goal is to provide end-to-end solutions for specific verticals. So that's the direction we're heading. True. Anyone else? Well, thank you, everyone.